Join me as I dive deep into the secrets that famous ghost hunters have been keeping under wraps. Ghost hunting has always been a fascinating topic, captivating the attention of many with its unpredictable and often inexplicable nature. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the allure of ghost hunting is undeniable. It's precisely this intrigue that has led many to explore the unknown, hoping to uncover evidence of the paranormal. Many famous ghost hunters have made names for themselves by venturing into the most haunted locations, capturing evidence, and sharing their experiences with the world. However, despite their popularity, there's an underlying skepticism that surrounds the field of ghost hunting. Critics argue that the evidence presented is often circumstantial, and that the methods used to collect it are unscientific and unreliable. These ghost hunters face a significant challenge in proving the authenticity of their findings, and their credibility is constantly being questioned. The skepticism surrounding ghost hunting is further fueled by the lack of concrete evidence and the inconsistent results obtained by different ghost hunting teams. This inconsistency raises questions about the legitimacy of the methods used to detect paranormal activity. Moreover, the scientific community has been vocal about the need for empirical evidence and rigorous testing, which is often lacking in ghost hunting investigations. Furthermore, the sensationalized portrayal of ghost hunting in popular media has contributed to the skepticism. The dramatic music, the jump scares, and the ominous narration all serve to create an atmosphere of fear, rather than a genuine exploration of the paranormal. This sensationalism has led many to view ghost hunting as more of a form of entertainment, rather than a serious pursuit of knowledge. In addition, the proliferation of ghost hunting equipment and gadgets has created an industry that thrives on selling fear and uncertainty. Many of these gadgets are unproven and lack any scientific basis, yet they're marketed as essential tools for detecting paranormal activity. This commercialization has further eroded the credibility of ghost hunting. Many well-known ghost hunters rely on techniques such as EVP, electronic voice phenomenon recordings, infrared thermometer readings, and EMF meter measurements to detect paranormal activity. However, these methods are often controversial and have been disputed by skeptics. EVP recordings, for instance, can be easily manipulated or misinterpreted, and infrared thermometer readings can be influenced by various environmental factors. Moreover, some ghost hunters have been accused of faking evidence or manipulating their findings to create a more dramatic narrative. This lack of transparency and accountability has led to a mistrust of the ghost hunting community. As a whole, controversy surrounding ghost hunting methods has also sparked debates about the ethics of investigating the paranormal. One surprising truth about ghost hunting is that many famous ghost hunters have, at some point, conceded that the evidence they present is often inconclusive or open to interpretation. This admission is often glossed over or omitted in their public presentations, creating a misleading narrative that suggests they have concrete proof of the paranormal. This revelation raises questions about the integrity of these ghost hunters and the motives behind their investigations. This admission also highlights the importance of questioning the narratives presented by ghost hunters. It's essential to approach their claims with a healthy dose of skepticism and to critically evaluate the evidence presented. By doing so, we can separate fact from fiction and gain a deeper understanding of the paranormal. In conclusion, the world of ghost hunting is complex and multifaceted. Many secrets and misconceptions hidden beneath the surface. It's crucial to approach this topic with a critical eye, questioning the methods and motives of those who claim to be seeking the truth. What do you think about ghost hunting? Have you had any personal experiences with the paranormal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to check out our other video, debunking the most famous ghost hunting myths, for more insights into the world of ghost hunting.
Part 1: The Unexplained Echoes. I never considered myself the type to go ghost hunting. It always seemed like a hobby reserved for thrill seekers who watched too many horror movies, or skeptics hoping to prove there was nothing beyond death. But when my best friend, Caleb, dragged me into a spontaneous overnight trip to Wolf Creek Manor, I didn't say no. Maybe it was because of the way he talked about it, the energy in his voice, the glint in his eye, like he knew something more. Caleb was always the curious one. Wolf Creek Manor wasn't just some abandoned building. It had history. Dark history. At least that's what the internet would have you believe. Reports of suicides, whispers of cult rituals, and of course, the inevitable, no one ever makes it through the night, urban legends. Despite the rumors, no one had ever really died in there. Not officially. It's all bullshit, you know, Caleb said as we drove up the narrow dirt road that led to the manor. People freak themselves out. They see shadows, hear the wind whistling, and think it's a ghost. I wasn't so sure. The place had a way of looking alive, even from a distance. The windows were gaping black holes, the kind that made you feel like someone, or something, was watching. The trees surrounding the manor were twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers pointing toward the sky. And even though it was a clear autumn evening, there was a fog creeping low on the ground, thick and unnatural. As we parked, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The car engine sputtered off, and we sat there for a moment, just looking at the house. I wanted to say something, crack a joke maybe, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't shake the feeling that once we crossed the threshold, things would never be the same. You ready? Caleb asked, his voice a little too casual. Yeah, I lied, gripping the handle of the car door. With a deep breath, we grabbed our gear, just a couple of flashlights, a digital recorder, and a cheap EMF detector Caleb bought online, and approached the house. The manor loomed over us, its shadow stretching across the lawn as if trying to swallow us whole. The front door was unlocked, which should have been a relief, but instead it felt like an invitation. A trap, even. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floors creaked under our weight. It was colder than I expected. My breath hung in the air as we moved through the foyer, our flashlights cutting weak beams through the darkness. The place was falling apart, peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, shattered windows, but there was a strange energy in the air. Like the walls were listening. We set up base in what might have once been a grand living room, back when the house was alive with parties and laughter. Now it was a tomb. Caleb fiddled with the EMF detector, his expression eager as it crackled to life, but I couldn't stop staring at the large fireplace at the far end of the room. Something about it seemed off, like it was too big, too deep. I didn't like it. Let's do a sweep of the upstairs, Caleb suggested. The bedrooms are supposed to be where the activity is. Activity, I muttered. Sure. The stairs groaned with each step, the sound echoing through the house. I tried to focus on Caleb's voice as he rambled on about cold spots and electromagnetic fields, but my mind kept wandering to the strange, oppressive feeling pressing down on my chest. The further we went into the house, the heavier the air felt. Almost like the house didn't want us there. We reached the landing, and Caleb pointed to a door at the end of the hall. That's the master bedroom. Apparently, that's where the original owner hanged himself after killing his wife. Great, I said, my voice flat. We pushed the door open. The room was huge, with a grand four-poster bed covered in dusty, moth-eaten linens. But what drew my attention wasn't the bed. It was the large, cracked mirror hanging on the opposite wall. It felt like it was watching us. Caleb went straight for the mirror, staring at it as if he expected something to happen. I didn't know why, but I hated it. There was something wrong with that mirror. Let's see if we can get any EVPs, Caleb said, pulling out the digital recorder. He clicked it on and placed it on the floor. We stood in silence for what felt like hours, waiting for something to happen. The only sound was the ticking of an old, unseen clock. After a while, Caleb started asking the usual ghost hunter questions. Is there anyone here with us? Can you give us a sign? But I barely heard him. My focus was locked on the mirror, on the dark, distorted reflection it cast of the room. And then, the reflection moved. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the shadows, but I saw it. My blood ran cold, and I took a step back, bumping into Caleb. What the hell? I whispered. What? He asked, but before I could answer, the EMF detector in his hand started buzzing like crazy, spiking into the red. Caleb's grin spread wide. Hell yeah. We got something. I wasn't so sure. The room felt different now, heavier, colder. There was a whispering sound, too soft to make out, but it was there, coming from the mirror. Caleb walked closer to it, his face lit up with excitement, but I stayed where I was. My instincts were screaming at me to run. Then, as Caleb reached out to touch the mirror, a low growl reverberated through the room. It wasn't human. It was deep, guttural, and filled with malice. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath again. Caleb froze, his hand inches from the glass, and slowly turned to look at me. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. But before I could answer, the growl turned into a deafening roar, and the mirror shattered, sending glass flying in every direction. Caleb screamed, dropping the EMF detector as he stumbled back, blood trickling down his arm where a shard had cut him. I grabbed him, pulling him toward the door, but the moment we reached the hallway, the air thickened. It felt like we were moving through water, every step heavier than the last. And behind us, something was moving. Something big. We didn't look back. We couldn't. Whatever was following us, it was furious. We barely made it down the stairs when the front door slammed shut on its own. Caleb yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. He cursed under his breath, and I could see the panic rising in his eyes. "We shouldn't have come here," I said, my voice shaking. "No shit," Caleb muttered, still pulling on the door. And then, we heard it, a soft whisper, almost like a child's voice, coming from the broken mirror upstairs. Why did you come? Part 2, Whispers in the Dark. The whispering echoed down the stairs, soft at first, but growing louder with every second. It was like the house itself was waking up, its voice rising from the shattered remains of that cursed mirror. Caleb's fingers were still wrapped around the door handle, pulling with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped. Why did you come? The voice was clearer now, almost too close, as if it were standing right behind us. Caleb let out a sharp breath and looked at me, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We stood there, frozen, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The air around us was thick with the scent of dust and mold, but beneath it, there was something else. Something metallic, like blood. The walls felt like they were closing in, the atmosphere crushing us from every side. The whisper came again, closer this time. You shouldn't be here. I turned to face the stairs, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw movement, a shadow flickering at the top of the landing, something watching us from just beyond the broken mirror. My heart pounded in my chest, and I had to fight the urge to run. But where would we go? Caleb swore under his breath and turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "We need to find another way out." "There's got to be a back door," I said, glancing around the room, trying to steady my breathing. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to get as far away from that voice as possible. Without another word, we bolted toward the hallway, passing under a massive, rusted chandelier that looked ready to crash down on us at any second. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something following us, but the stairs were empty. Just the silence of the house, pressing in from all sides. Yet, the overwhelming feeling that we weren't alone gnawed at the edges of my mind. We found the kitchen at the end of the hallway, a large, cavernous space with ancient appliances that hadn't been touched in decades. Dust covered everything, and the faint, sour smell of rotten food clung to the air. Caleb was already searching the back wall, looking for the door. There it was, a solid, wooden frame that led to what I assumed was the backyard. Caleb threw his weight against it, rattling the doorknob, but it didn't give. "Are you kidding me?" he hissed. I rushed to his side and grabbed the handle, trying to twist it open, but it was locked tight. Panic flared in my chest. There was no keyhole, no visible lock, and the windows lining the kitchen were all barred with thick iron rods, like a cage. Whoever, or whatever, owned this place didn't want anyone getting out. Caleb stepped back, panting. "This is insane, man. This wasn't supposed to happen. It's just supposed to be some abandoned house." Before I could respond, a noise cut through the silence, a dragging sound, slow and deliberate. It was coming from the hallway behind us. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. We both turned toward the doorway, our flashlights pointed into the darkness. The beam flickered for a moment before settling on an empty space, the faint creaking of floorboards echoing through the house. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Caleb nodded, his face tense. We stood there, frozen in place, listening. The dragging sound came again, closer this time. My chest tightened as I strained to make out what it was. Footsteps, maybe? Or something worse? Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath again, hanging in the air like fog. Caleb and I exchanged a glance, and I could tell he was just as freaked out as I was. The fear was tangible now, wrapping itself around us like a vice. Then, out of nowhere, the kitchen lights flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging us into total darkness. I grabbed Caleb's arm, my pulse racing. The only light now was from our flashlights, which barely seemed to cut through the oppressive blackness surrounding us. Click, click, click. The sound of something tapping against the floor. Slow. Methodical. Like fingernails tapping on wood. I raised my flashlight, aiming it toward the doorway, but the beam sputtered and died. The batteries, new ones Caleb had insisted on, gave out with no warning. I smacked the flashlight against my palm, trying to bring it back to life, but it was useless. Caleb's flashlight was still working, but even its beam seemed weaker than before, as if the darkness was swallowing the light. Click, click, click. The sound was closer now, just beyond the doorway. I wanted to scream, to tell Caleb to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Every muscle in my body felt locked in place, paralyzed by the sheer terror that gripped me. And then, we saw it. A shadow, tall and twisted, stepped into the doorway. It didn't walk, it glided, as if its feet weren't even touching the ground. Caleb's flashlight flickered, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls, but it was enough to see the thing standing there. It wasn't human. Not anymore. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. But what struck me the most were its eyes, black, empty voids that seemed to suck in all the light around them. The thing tilted its head, studying us, and in the dim light, I saw its mouth twist into a grotesque grin. Caleb let out a strangled gasp, stumbling back as the thing took a step toward us, its long fingers brushing against the doorframe. "Run!" Caleb screamed, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the back of the kitchen. We ran, our footsteps echoing in the dead silence of the house. The thing followed, its movements eerily slow, but steady. No matter how fast we ran, I could hear it behind us, always just a few steps away. We reached a narrow doorway that led to what looked like a pantry, and Caleb shoved me through, slamming the door shut behind us. Inside, the air was thick and stifling. We were crammed into a small, cramped space, surrounded by shelves filled with cans and boxes long past their expiration date. Caleb leaned against the door, panting heavily, his eyes wide with fear. "What the hell was that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Caleb shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. "I don't know, man. But it's not human. We need to get the hell out of here." Suddenly, the door rattled. We both jumped, our eyes locked on the handle as it turned slowly, inch by inch. The thing was trying to get in. My heart pounded in my chest, and I backed away, searching for something, anything, we could use to block the door. But there was nothing. Just old, rotting shelves and useless junk. The door creaked as the pressure on the other side increased, and I knew it wouldn't hold for long. "We're screwed," I whispered. The door handle jerked violently, and the wood splintered. Caleb let out a choked breath, his eyes darting around the tiny room. "We need a plan," he whispered urgently. "We can't just wait here to die." Then, as if on cue, the whisper came again. The same voice from upstairs. Asterisk, "You shouldn't have come." Asterisk. It wasn't just a whisper anymore, it was right outside the door, like it was inside my head, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" There was a moment of silence, and then the voice came again, softer this time. Asterisk, "Leave, before it's too late." Asterisk. The words sent a chill down my spine. Whatever was in this house, whatever was stalking us, it didn't want us dead. Not yet. But something else did. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the thing stepped into the room. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of sharp, rotting teeth. My stomach twisted as the stench of decay filled the air. I didn't think. I just acted. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Caleb toward the only window in the room. Part 3, The Shadows Within. Caleb and I scrambled toward the small, grimy window, the cold glass slick with condensation. The thing behind us moved faster now, its twisted limbs scraping against the walls as it closed in. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I could feel the cold, rancid breath of whatever it was on the back of my neck. "Move!" I shouted, shoving Caleb forward as I grabbed the window frame and yanked it open. The wood groaned under my weight, and I felt the sting of splinters digging into my palms, but I didn't care. We had to get out. Now. Caleb hesitated, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he looked back toward the doorway where the creature stood, its black, soulless eyes locked on us. I could see the terror on his face, the paralyzing fear that kept him rooted to the spot. "Caleb, now!" I shouted again, pulling him toward the window. Finally, he snapped out of it and hoisted himself up, struggling to climb through the narrow opening. The thing growled, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the walls, and I knew we only had seconds before it was on us. I could feel the air shifting, growing colder, and I knew that whatever this creature was, it wasn't bound by the rules of this world. The moment Caleb's feet hit the ground outside, I threw myself through the window, landing hard on the damp earth below. My knees buckled, sending a sharp jolt of pain up my leg, but there was no time to stop. I grabbed Caleb's arm, pulling him up as we sprinted toward the tree line at the back of the property. The wind howled around us, whipping the fog into a frenzy, and the trees seemed to close in, their branches twisting together like skeletal fingers. Every step felt like we were running through molasses, our feet sinking into the cold, wet earth. I glanced back once, just for a second, and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was at the window, its twisted body halfway through, clawing at the frame as if it were trying to pull itself into the world. It shouldn't have been possible, the way it moved, the way its limbs seemed to bend and contort in unnatural angles. But the worst part was its grin. That same, horrifying grin, stretched wide across its face as if it knew there was no escape. "Go!" I screamed at Caleb, shoving him ahead of me as we plunged into the forest. The branches slapped against our faces, cutting into our skin, but we didn't stop. I didn't even care about the pain. We just needed to get as far away from that house as possible. The trees grew denser as we ran, their shadows deepening, swallowing up what little light there was. The fog thickened, wrapping itself around us like a living thing. It was disorienting. Every direction looked the same, just endless trees and the suffocating darkness that seemed to follow us. The cold gnawed at my bones, and my breath came out in ragged gasps, but we kept running. There was no choice. After what felt like hours, we finally collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they were made of lead, but we had made it. For now. I think we lost it, Caleb panted, his voice shaking. I wasn't so sure. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The forest was too quiet, too still. No rustling of leaves, no chirping of crickets. Just the oppressive silence that weighed heavy on us. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings, but everything looked the same, dark, twisted trees that loomed over us like silent sentinels. Caleb sat beside me, his face pale, streaked with sweat and dirt. He was shaking, and I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the fear. "We need to keep moving," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "We can't stay here." He nodded, but didn't move. I could see it in his eyes, the exhaustion, the hopelessness. He didn't think we were going to make it. Hell, neither did I. But I couldn't let that thing catch us. Not after what we had seen. Not after it had followed us this far. As I stood up, something caught my attention. A glint of light in the distance. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a trick of the fog. But then I saw it again, a faint glow, flickering through the trees. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward the light. Caleb squinted, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" "I don't know. But it's better than sitting here waiting to die." Without waiting for a response, I started moving toward the light. Caleb followed, though his steps were slower, more hesitant. As we got closer, the light grew brighter, and I could see that it was coming from what looked like a small cabin, hidden deep within the forest. The windows glowed with a warm, orange light, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe we could find help. Maybe we could finally get out of this nightmare. We approached cautiously, my eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The door to the cabin was slightly ajar, and I could hear the faint crackling of a fire inside. I glanced at Caleb, who nodded, and together, we stepped up to the porch. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no response. I pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The cabin was small, but cozy. A fire burned in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. There was a worn, leather armchair in the corner, and a small table set with 2 empty mugs. It looked like someone had just been there, but the cabin was empty. "Where is everyone?" Caleb whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice tight. Something about this place didn't feel right. The warmth, the fire, it was too perfect. Too inviting. Caleb moved toward the table, picking up one of the mugs. It was warm to the touch, as if it had just been used. He frowned, setting it down. "This is weird, man. We should." Before he could finish, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang. We both jumped, spinning around to face the door, but no one was there. And then I saw it, etched into the wooden walls, barely visible in the dim light, words, scratched deep into the wood, repeating over and over again in jagged, desperate strokes. Asterisk, don't look. Don't look. Don't look, asterisk. My heart dropped into my stomach. Caleb. But before I could finish, the fire in the hearth flickered, then went out, plunging us into darkness. Suddenly, the sound came again. That same soft, rhythmic tapping. Click, click, click. It was inside the cabin with us. I grabbed Caleb, my hand trembling, and we backed away slowly, our eyes locked on the shadows in the corner of the room. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. And then, the voice, the same one that had whispered to us in the manor, came again. Asterisk, you can't hide. Asterisk. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the darkness pressing down on us. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it was right next to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Asterisk, why did you come? Asterisk. The voice was a low growl now, vibrating through my skull. I could feel it crawling into my mind, twisting my thoughts, feeding on my fear. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The mirror. The same cracked mirror from the master bedroom in the manor. It stood in the corner, reflecting nothing but shadows. Caleb saw it too, his face pale with terror. That wasn't there before. The tapping stopped, and the room was silent. Too silent. My heart raced, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The mirror called to me, its cracked surface shimmering with a strange, otherworldly light. I took a step toward it, unable to stop myself. My reflection stared back at me, distorted and twisted, my eyes hollow and dark. Come closer, the voice whispered, and I felt a cold hand brush against the back of my neck. Part 4, The Eyes of the Mirror. The cold touch sent a jolt of terror through me, freezing my muscles. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My reflection in the cracked mirror seemed to shift, warping into something unrecognizable, a shadow of myself, twisted and wrong. Its eyes were hollow, like black voids that sucked in the light around them. And worst of all, it was smiling. The room felt impossibly small now, the walls pressing in from all sides. I could barely breathe, the air thick with something unnatural. Beside me, Caleb was frozen too, his eyes wide and locked on the mirror. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths, but his feet stayed glued to the ground. The voice came again, soft and insidious. Asterisk, come closer. Asterisk. It felt like something was pulling me toward the mirror, an invisible force dragging me against my will. My legs moved on their own, my hand reaching out toward the cracked surface. The cold radiating from the glass seemed to seep into my bones, chilling me from the inside out. Just as my fingertips grazed the edge of the mirror, I heard Caleb's voice, weak and trembling. Don't touch it. But it was too late. The moment my skin made contact with the glass, everything changed. The cabin vanished, swallowed by a darkness so complete it felt like I had been submerged underwater. I couldn't see anything, not even Caleb. It was like the world had disappeared, leaving me in this empty, suffocating void. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound loud in my ears, but I couldn't hear anything else. Not the wind, not the tapping, not even my own breath. I wasn't alone, though. In the pitch-black silence, I felt it, the presence. It was all around me, pressing in from every direction, its malice like a physical weight on my shoulders. My skin crawled with the sensation of being watched, thousands of invisible eyes boring into me from the darkness. Then, slowly, the whispers began. They were faint at first, just a soft rustling in the back of my mind. But they grew louder, more insistent, until they filled my head, an endless stream of incoherent voices. I tried to shut them out, to close my eyes and block them from my mind, but it was no use. The voices were everywhere. Asterisk, why did you come? Asterisk, they whispered, overlapping and distorting until the words lost all meaning. I clutched my head, my nails digging into my scalp as the voices intensified, growing louder and louder until they were deafening. I wanted to scream, to make it stop, but the sound stuck in my throat. My body felt like it was being ripped apart, pulled in 1,000 different directions by the darkness that surrounded me. Just when I thought I would lose my mind completely, a sharp, burning pain shot through my hand, the hand still touching the mirror. With a gasp, I yanked it back, stumbling away from the glass and falling hard onto the wooden floor. The cabin rushed back into focus, the warmth of the fire in the hearth a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive void I had just been trapped in. My hand throbbed, and when I looked down, I saw blood, thin, red lines crisscrossing my palm like a spiderweb. The mirror had cut me, but the wound felt deeper, as if it had sliced into something beyond just flesh. Caleb was at my side in an instant, grabbing my arm and pulling me to my feet. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered, his voice shaking. I couldn't answer. My mind was still reeling from whatever had just happened. All I knew was that the mirror, it wasn't just glass. It was something else. Something alive. "Let's get out of here," Caleb said, his grip on my arm tightening. We stumbled toward the door, our legs weak and unsteady, but the moment we reached for the handle, the room darkened again. Not like before, not complete darkness, but a deep, unnatural shadow that crept across the walls like ink spreading through water. The fire in the hearth flickered, its glow dimming as the cold seeped back in. And then, the tapping started again. Click, click, click. It was coming from behind us, from the mirror. My heart sank, and I didn't have to turn around to know what was standing there. The thing from the manor, the twisted, grinning creature, was back, watching us with those hollow, black eyes. I could feel its gaze on me, heavy and suffocating, like it was peeling back layers of my skin, searching for something deep inside. My stomach twisted, and a wave of nausea rolled over me. I didn't want to look. I couldn't. But some part of me, the part that had touched the mirror, wanted to. It was calling to me, pulling at the edges of my mind. Caleb was shaking, his hand still on the door handle. "We need to go," he whispered, but his voice was barely audible over the sound of the tapping. Click, click, click. I turned my head, just a fraction, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The thing was standing in front of the mirror, but it wasn't a reflection. It was real, its lanky, deformed body looming over us. Its grin was wider now, stretching impossibly across its face, and its fingers, long, thin, and tipped with jagged claws, drummed against the surface of the mirror. And then, it spoke. Asterisk, "Why did you come?" Asterisk. The voice wasn't just in my head this time. It echoed through the cabin, low and guttural, like a beast speaking through a human throat. The air around us grew colder, the shadows creeping closer, wrapping around us like tendrils. Caleb's breath hitched, and I could feel him trembling beside me. "We didn't mean to," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. The creature's grin faltered for a moment, and I saw something in its eyes, something dark, ancient, and hungry. It tilted its head, studying us with a curiosity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You opened the door," it said, its voice slithering through the air like a snake. "Now you cannot leave." The words sent a bolt of panic through me, and I pulled at the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. Caleb was pulling too, his face contorted in fear, but the door stayed firmly shut, as if it were part of the house itself. The creature took a step toward us, its eyes fixed on me. I could feel its presence growing stronger, its malice thick in the air. My mind raced, trying to find a way out, but there was nothing. We were trapped. And then, something changed. The creature stopped, its grin fading as it cocked its head, listening. The air shifted, and for a moment, I thought I heard something, soft, distant, like a faint whisper coming from somewhere beyond the walls. The creature's eyes narrowed, and it let out a low growl. Without warning, the fire in the hearth roared back to life, its flames casting long, flickering shadows across the room. The creature hissed, recoiling from the light, its form dissolving into the darkness like smoke. The tapping stopped, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Caleb and I stood frozen, staring at the spot where the creature had been. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, its warmth seeping back into the room, but the cold remained in the air, a lingering reminder of the thing that had been here. What just happened?" Caleb whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was still reeling, trying to process what we had just seen, what we had just escaped from. I looked down at my hand, at the thin red lines crisscrossing my palm. The cuts weren't deep, but they burned like fire, a constant reminder of the mirror's touch. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice hoarse. "Now." Caleb didn't argue. He yanked the door open, and this time, it gave way. We stumbled out of the cabin and into the cold night air, our breath coming in ragged gasps. The fog had thickened, swirling around us like a living thing, but I didn't care. We were out. We were free. Or so I thought. As we ran through the forest, the trees twisting and bending in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the creature following us, but there was nothing. Just the shadows. But then I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. "You opened the door." Part 5, The Unseen Door. The whisper followed us as we ran, growing louder with each step. It wasn't just behind us anymore, it was all around us, slipping through the trees, carried on the cold wind. My heart raced, the sound gnawing at the edges of my sanity, a constant reminder of the thing we'd left behind in the cabin. Asterisk, you opened the door. You opened the door, asterisk. The words twisted through my mind, seeping into every thought, making it impossible to focus on anything else. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing for certain, we hadn't escaped. Not yet. Caleb was stumbling ahead of me, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the fog swallowing his form as he pushed through the dense underbrush. The cold night air burned in my lungs, and my legs felt like they were made of lead, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, whatever was following us would catch up. And I couldn't let that happen. We broke through the trees into a small clearing, the moonlight barely cutting through the thick fog. I stopped for a moment, gasping for air, and Caleb collapsed onto his knees, his body trembling from exhaustion. Where do we go now?" Caleb panted, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. He was shaking, his skin pale and slick with sweat. I could see the fear in him, the same fear gnawing away at my own resolve. "I don't know," I whispered, looking around, desperate for any sign of where we were. But everything looked the same, dark, twisted trees that stretched up into the sky, their branches tangling together like skeletal fingers. We were deep in the forest now, and there was no telling how far we had come from Wolf Creek Manor. The fog was so thick it felt like we were trapped inside a dream, the real world just out of reach. But the worst part was the feeling. That cold, oppressive weight that settled over us, wrapping around us like a second skin. It was heavier now, more present. The thing that had followed us from the house was still close. Too close. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I reached down and grabbed Caleb's arm, pulling him to his feet. "We have to keep moving." Caleb nodded weakly, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He was spent. So was I. But there was no stopping. Not now. We started moving again, deeper into the forest, the trees closing in around us. The fog was thicker here, swirling in strange patterns, almost like it was alive, guiding us somewhere. The whispers continued, soft but insistent, always just out of reach. Asterisk, you opened the door. You can't escape. Asterisk. I tried to ignore them, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, but the words clung to me, sinking into my bones like ice. My hand throbbed where the mirror had cut me, the thin red lines on my palm burning like fire. I didn't know what the cuts meant, but I knew they weren't just from the glass. The mirror had done something to me, something I couldn't understand. The trees ahead of us parted, and we found ourselves standing at the edge of another clearing. But this one was different. At the center of the clearing stood a large, stone structure, half hidden by the fog. It looked ancient, like something from another time, its surface covered in thick, twisting vines. The stone was dark, almost black, and carved into its surface were strange, intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The structure was circular, and at its center was an archway, a door. But there was no building, no house or walls. Just the door, standing alone in the middle of the clearing, leading to nowhere. Caleb stopped beside me, staring at the strange structure with wide eyes. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaky. My heart pounded in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to run in the other direction. But something held me there, rooted to the spot, my eyes locked on the door. The whispers grew louder. The door. "It's open, My blood ran cold. This was the door the creature had been talking about. The one we had opened. But I didn't understand. How? We hadn't touched it. We hadn't even seen it before. But the door was there, standing in the center of the clearing, waiting for us. Caleb stepped forward, his movements slow, hesitant. Do you think this is how we get out?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing, the whispers growing louder and louder until they drowned out every other thought. I could feel the presence again, the thing from the manor. It was here, somewhere in the fog, watching us, waiting for us to make a choice. "You can't escape." The door loomed before us, its dark surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. I could feel it pulling at me, drawing me closer. The air around us grew colder, and the fog seemed to press in from all sides, wrapping around us like a shroud. "We can't go through that," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Caleb turned to me, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "What else are we supposed to do? We're trapped. We can't go back to the manor. We can't stay in the forest. Maybe this is our only way out." I shook my head, my throat tight with fear. "No. That door, it's not right. There's something wrong with it." But even as I said the words, I knew there was no other choice. The whispers were growing louder, more insistent, and I could feel the cold fingers of dread wrapping around my heart. Whatever was in the fog, whatever was watching us, it was closing in. Caleb took another step toward the door, his hand outstretched. "We have to try." "Caleb, wait." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. But before I could stop him, his fingers grazed the stone. The moment his hand touched the door, everything changed. The air around us exploded with sound, a deafening roar that echoed through the forest, shaking the ground beneath our feet. The door began to glow, its surface pulsing with a sickly, green light that made my skin crawl. The symbols carved into the stone shifted and twisted, rearranging themselves into new patterns that I couldn't understand. Caleb stumbled back, his hand clutched to his chest, his eyes wide with terror. "What the hell?" But before he could finish, the door swung open with a loud crack, the stone groaning as it revealed a dark, swirling void beyond. The air around us grew impossibly cold, and the whispers turned into a low, guttural growl that vibrated through my skull. "You opened the door. Now you must enter." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, but Caleb was frozen, his eyes locked on the swirling void inside the door. His face was pale, and I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear that was clawing its way through me. "Caleb, don't!" I shouted, but my voice sounded distant, muffled by the roar of the wind that had suddenly picked up, whipping through the clearing. But it was too late. The moment Caleb took a step toward the door, the ground beneath him shifted, and he was pulled forward, his body yanked into the swirling darkness. His scream echoed through the air, but it was cut off abruptly as the door slammed shut behind him, the sound like thunder cracking through the night. I stood there, frozen, my mind unable to process what had just happened. Caleb was gone. The door was closed. And I was alone. The silence that followed was deafening, the whispers gone, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. The fog pressed in from all sides, suffocating, and the cold wrapped around me like a vice. My legs trembled beneath me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. And then, from the darkness beyond the trees, I heard it. Click, click, click. The sound of something moving through the fog, slow and deliberate, getting closer with each passing second. I turned, my heart hammering in my chest, and there, just at the edge of the clearing, I saw it. The creature from the manor. Its hollow, black eyes locked on me, its twisted grin stretching impossibly wide. It took a step toward me, its long, deformed fingers tapping against the trees as it moved. And I knew, in that moment, that there was no escape. Not anymore. I had opened the door. And now, I was trapped. Forever. The end.